Hi guys, welcome back to the Small Bound Workshop. It's another cold day. This week I thought I would make a short video of probably the most common question I get on this channel. It's about my Benchdog cutting station and how I set it up to quickly make accurate cuts. So just to break it down into its components, I use mine with my Fenchdog track saw, and I specifically bought an 800mm fend, a little bit wider than the bench, so I could run the saw on that. And then my Benchdog graduated fence with its flag stop. A piece of this setup is the Benchdog rail square with these two dogs on the back. Now the question I get quite often is, if I can just focus in on them, these dogs have adjustable flanges on them, so you can set the height so the saw rail just sits directly above the timber. My standard stock range is somewhere between 3/4 and an inch thick, 18 to 25mm, and rather than adjust these every time, I keep these at an inch. So when I cut the thinner pieces, 18mm or so, the rail is suspended over the timber. So when I cut the 18mm 7/8 timber, the edge of the track is sat a few millimetres above the height of the timber. And the most common question I get is, don't you get a lot of tear out with your rail not being hard down on the piece of timber you're cutting? Now I have to say, I don't see that being an issue. I don't see a lot of tear out. However, I've never actually put it to the test. So I'm going to do a little experiment today. I'm going to put this back in the bench. I'm going to set the saw up and I'm going to cut some solid timber, some MDF and some MFC chipboard. In the mode that I set this up, also just make the same cut with the track sat down on top of the timber and compare the cuts and see if there actually is any difference. Let's do the test and let's see what results we get. Now the other reason I don't move these around too much is because I'm always mindful with small grub screws. If you can focus on there, with small grub screws, eventually you strip out the thread or the head or the actual Allen key that adjusts it. I don't know if there's a word for grub screw phobia, but if there is, I've probably suffered from it. So let's put the kit back together. First of all, let's put the square in its holes. Let's put the fend doggles, the rail in the square, tighten that up. Down here just tighten up my rail support. It's okay. So as you can see, this piece of timber here, which is a piece of floorboard, is actually 21mm. If I slide that under there, then my rail is actually sat about 10mm or 3/8 above the height of the workpiece. So let's make that . So that cut there with 3 marks on is the cut with the track knocked down. And there's really no tear out there at all. Just point out here that I've had this saw now for 18 months and it's done quite a lot of work. Obviously it's not been used every day, but it's done a lot of work and it certainly still is my favourite tool that I own. And the blade that's in it is the original blade that came with it. So it's an 18-month-old blade that's cut, that's done quite a lot of work. So that's the cross cut without the rail being sat on the workpiece. Now the next cut we'll do is with a piece of this 20mm MFC. This is what I made my wardrobe from. It's an off-cut. Put 3 lines on that. Again, I'll try not to disturb the cut. And lastly, I've got a really horrible piece of 9mm plywood. So this is well below the level of the track. Just put us 3 marks on. Right, 3 marks on. And let's make them cuts with the track down on the piece of wood. We use this board as a sacrificial board, so I'm not cutting holes into my new bench top. There's my piece of plywood. There's my track hard down. I'll set my saw to cut about 16mm and we'll make that cut. and I'll mark that with a 2 mark. 1, 2. Now the MFC, so down to that, so I'm cutting through it. Mark my 2 marks on, 1, 2, and lastly we'll do the same for this piece of floorboarding. One, two. So let's have a look at these together now. There's my above cut, there's my on cut. There's a tiny little bit, I can see focus. There's a tiny little bit of breakout there. But there's also a tiny little bit of breakout there. Maybe not quite as much, but it is on a knot, whether that makes a difference. Let's have a look at the MFC. This is our down cut, and this is our on cut. So, I mean, it's not really raggedy here because this is just what's come out of the curve. It's just loose pieces. You can actually pull them off. You're not pulling the melamine face off the board. It's just redundant material that's been removed. There's certainly more redundant material on this, but the cut, once you just smooth that off, I'm not sanding it, well I am sanding it, but sanding it with the roughness of my finger, there's not really any difference there. And lastly, the plywood, and of course plywood is very splashy across the cross cut. Now it's not the best quality plywood. There's a bit of tear out there. That side is okay, and there's a bit of tear out there. That one's not too bad. But of course, when you put the fence on any of these cuts, if you put the fence hard down, then this anti-splinter guard here is going to try and resist the tear out on this face. The face that's not under the track anyway is still prone to tear out. Now that might be your off cut, but it's not always your off cut. You're not always cutting your off cut on that side. But even there, the piece that was under the track, but the track wasn't on it, it was a good 20 millimetres above. And that side's alright. Not really any different from there. But we've probably got more tear out there on the side that wasn't under the fence. And even if the fence had been hard down on that, I don't really think it would have made any difference. But there you go guys, that was a quick video for this week. Because some of you have been asking these questions, I thought it was interesting to do the experiment and to share it with you. I certainly think now, seeing this experiment, that what I was doing by keeping the saw above the track, so I can easily just slide pieces regardless of the thickness of pieces. I can just keep sliding pieces in, cross-cutting, sliding, cross-cutting, sliding, cross-cutting. If I had it set absolutely bang on, then almost every piece of wood that I cut, I would have to alter the height. So I think what I've been doing now is correct. I don't think there's an issue with what I'm doing. But if you think different or you have any other ideas, let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe. It helps me out a great deal by doing so. And until next week, bye. I keep these mostly